Hello and welcome to Unleashed. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm delighted to be here today with attorney at law Samora P.Z. Wolokolie, who is a attorney based in Monrovia, Liberia. Samora, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. It's a pleasure having a debut on your show this morning.
Thank you.
And good
I
morning from London, Ontario.
All right. So today you're in London, and we met just last week at a conference, and I thought you had a fascinating story. So let's start with your story. You're both a CPA, an accountant, and an attorney, and you have a PhD. You've been the Deputy Minister of Finance in Liberia. You've had a fascinating career. I'd love to hear just a little bit about your career journey, just to start off with.
Thank you, Will. I'm Samora, again, Wolokolie, PZ Wolokolie. I am a chartered accountant. I'm a certified public accountant. I'm a certified forensic investigation professional. I'm a certified fraud examiner. I'm a certified tax practitioner. And I'm a lawyer licensed to practice in the Republic of Liberia. I'm also an associate assistant professor of accounting at the University of Liberia in Monrovia. I teach accounting. I teach all levels of accounting, from principles of accounting to advanced financial reporting. I also lecture in a few universities, Cuttington University and Stella Marie's Polytechnic as well. Sarah Marie's Polytechnic University. Of course, it's a university I graduated where I got my bachelor's degree, my first degree. And then, of course, I matriculated at Cuttington University, got my first master's, Cuttington. Then went to Charisma University and got a PhD, a master's of science in forensic accounting and audit, and got a PhD in accounting, professional accounting and audit. I am a chartered accountant. I qualified as a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Ghana. I'm a certified public accountant and member of the Liberian Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And again, like I said, I'm a lawyer, a graduate of the Louis Arthur Graham's School of Law, University of Liberia, and I've been practicing law in Liberia since 2021. I began my career as a young emerging accountant with Deloitte. Deloitte had an affiliation with a firm in Monrovia back in the year 2000. That's when I joined Deloitte. In 2000, I worked with Voscom. Voscom was the leading accounting firm in Liberia. And fast forward, I had the opportunity to have worked with PKF Liberia and work with Baker Tilly. Those are all auditing firms, notable firms in Liberia. And then I had the opportunity while working at Baker Tilly. And then that's when I qualified to become a chartered accountant in 2014. And then I left Baker Tilly and established an accounting firm. While there, in 2018, I got called by His Excellency President George Manuel Weah, former President of the Republic of Liberia, to serve as Liberia's Deputy Minister of Finance for Fiscal Affairs. That position enabled me to have a responsibility of managing the revenue and expenditure of the government of Liberia, meaning the government national budget. When I became Deputy Minister for Fiscal Affairs, we're running a budget hooping around 600, a little over 600 million. I spent 6 years in that position, and we grew that budget from 600 million to 800 million until my departure from that position in 2024 of January. Of course, my departure was occasioned by the elections of a new government. And of course, the new government had its own appointees. My responsibility was more like doing cash management for the budget of the Republic, ensuring that the government expenditure was streamlined around thematic areas, funding development agenda of the government on the expenditure side, and managing, doing serious fiscal management prudence with the resources of the country.
What are the major sources of revenue for the government? Is it income taxes or sales taxes or tariffs, or what's the major sources of revenue for the government of
Correct.
Liberia?
It's based on the source of revenue for the government is on domestic revenue mobilization, domestic tax, and donor support. So more than 90%, a little over 90% of the government budget comes from domestic generated revenue. And then the rest of the percentage, sometimes hovering around 15, 10% will come from donors. Donors, we call it external resources, come to the government through the IMF, the World Bank, the European Union, and development partners as well. Mm. And then some of them, they come in different, under different considerations. You have grants and loans. Mm. Sometimes, even if they borrow, they will say, we make 50% of the payment of that amount in grants. 50% is not a loan, meaning it's given to you free as a grant. Of course, they come with different conditions as well. You must meet certain benchmarks. For instance, some of the budget support comes, they tell you that you must have, the government must ensure that it conducts audits on the consolidated accounts of the government of Liberia. That is a key thing. If that audit is not conducted and reports are not up, the government doesn't benefit from that. So I'm just giving an example of some of the requirements. So it's not just a money sitting in the park. You must do something to generate it or to have access to it, if you mind. And then on the revenue side, we were responsible because we have the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. We have the Liberia Revenue Authority. We had the responsibility to supervise the Revenue Authority to the extent of developing regulations, revenue policies for the implementation and the collection of revenue. So the actual collection of revenue function of the government is domiciled at the Liberia Revenue Authority, where they have the responsibility to collect government revenue. The Ministry of Finance more or less provide guidance and design policies and regulations that informs or promotes revenue collections. Mm-hmm. So my job at the Ministry of Finance, Fiscal Affairs on the revenue side had to do with revenue policies, regulations, and supervisions to ensure efficient revenue collection. And one of our major achievements there was to focus on what we refer to as the domestic resource mobilization strategy, where we intended to move the government budget, from a whopping amount of 500 million to 1 billion. And of course, this objective remains the objectives of the government of Liberia today. Even our successor are pushing to move our national budget to 1 billion. Liberia budget has not moved to 1 billion yet. It's been a struggle to move. Right now it's around $700 and some more million to move it to 1 billion. So there has to be a lot of tax policies, revenue measures, implementations, and a lot of different measures to do that. It requires a lot of thinking to have these things done.
And what are the major sources of revenue? Is it personal income tax or business tax or sales tax or import duties, or how does Liberia collect?
So our revenue sources are divided, like I said, into domestic revenue. Domestic revenue are normally broken up into direct and indirect taxes. So direct taxes will basically include income taxes from businesses and from individuals, taxes that comes from, we have different sectors of our economy. The mining sector brings a lot of taxes to the government of Liberia. It's an area that is gaining traction in Liberia. Liberia has serious potential and unblemished potential for mining. It is an environment that is open for investment. It's an environment that, we have a little less than 6 million people. And we have very, very rich areas of natural resources. In the mining, in the forestry sector, we have logs in Liberia. So our revenue base potential normally come from these particular thematic areas. Customs, in terms of the importation of goods, Liberia is an import-driven economy. We import a lot of things. There are not too much manufacturers in Liberia. Few of the manufacturing companies are there, and a lot of little resources come from there enough. So if most of the investors move towards acquiring these raw materials and transmitting these raw materials into finished product, that is the whole production cycle, Liberia will move very heavily and greatly in terms of generation of revenue for that 1 billion target. So that's basically a summary of my responsibility at the Ministry of Finance. So when I left the Ministry of Finance in 2024 of January, I moved to the firm, Alliance CPA. And by then, I had already become a lawyer. So we have two firms in one building. Alliance CPA, which is the accounting firm, and then we have Plush Professional Consultancy Incorporated. That is the law firm. In the accounting firm, I serve as the managing partner and the chief executive officer, meaning I practically take responsibility to run the firm. I have a partner who is a professor of accounting, Professor G. Thomas M. Duo. He is the senior partner in the accounting firm. And then we have the law firm. The law firm, I serve as a staff lawyer in the law firm as a associate legal counsel. I'm supervised by Councilor Paul Chi Hilton, Senior. He is the managing partner. And we have another partner, Councilor James N. Kumen. So the law firm has three partners as lawyers, Councilor Paul Hilton, Councilor James Kumen, and myself. We run those. So we have a one-stop shop in that building. We deal with accounting and legal issues. How I met you through Allied Global Alliance. So the interesting thing is that our accounting firm, Alliance CPA, is a member of Allied Global Alliance. The law firm hasn't joined the alliance yet, but is in the process of making its membership effective with the alliance latest by next year, early next year. These are the kinds of business or work we do in terms of the professional environment. So I just scoop back from government back to my professional style, what I know.
So you mentioned it earlier, but tell us a bit more about the economy of Liberia. What are the main industries in Liberia? What's growing? You mentioned mining, you mentioned forestry. Can you tell us a little bit more detail about the economy?
So Liberia, like I said, is an import-driven based economy. Liberia is an environment green and ready for investment. It's an environment that is quite investment friendly. Of course, it comes with its own austerities about the rigor of achieving those investments at the end of the day, or actualizing those investments, yielding returns on those investments when investment actually happens. So we have different areas of development thrive. I mentioned the mining sector. The mining sector is the huge potential and in an environment where we generate the highest of our revenue from. There are big opportunities for mining in Liberia. We also have the forestry, where there is this, of course, the timberland process and PUP permit process with forestry and logs. Those regulations are not overlooked, but at the same time, we have a lot of potential. We have huge forests in Liberia that people can come and invest and get themselves involved in the process. Also have infrastructure development. There are a lot of constructions of roads, connectivities from one government to the other. The government is hugely spending resources on roads. When I say infrastructure, most of the infrastructure activities in Liberia right now has to do with the construction of new roads, either the construction of new roads or the rehabilitation and maintenance of existing roads. That is what is happening right now in the country. And it's also drifting towards infrastructure in terms of buildings, having constructions of new buildings, be it Biddings happening by initiative of the government or by initiative of the private sector investment people. All of those things are factors that are heavily considered, as a major drive for potential investment in Liberia. And then also on the human capital side, there is. So normally, if you have these investment companies heavily investing into the economy of Liberia, you agree with me that they will employ people, and these employees will have to pay taxes to the government on their personal income tax. And that's a way of revenue being trickled in an environment or so. So this is a very serious and huge, potential for growth in Liberia. And the environment, the good thing about what makes our situation very unique is that our population, given the density of population around our neighbors and other countries, even if you're making a comparison between Liberia and other countries, like somewhere in the same West Africa or outside West Africa, you agree with me that our population is low and we have serious green natural resources. So it means that the potential to transfer that natural resource to cater to the very minimum number of people in terms of the population, the potential is high, and there is a big tendency of our economy booming very soon over the period of time.
You talked about mining. What specific metals are the big part of the mining industry in Liberia?
So we mine gold, we mine iron ore, we mine diamonds. Iron ore, you may refer to it in the West as steel, steel, right? Metals.
Sure.
That's what we call iron ores. So there is a big, big, big potential of iron ore investment in Liberia. We have the ArcelorMittal of the world, who is involved with mining. It's our major iron ore company in Liberia, ArcelorMittal. We have in the area of gold, we have Orios Mining, B Mountain Mining Corporation. That's a very big corporation involved with gold. And there are other different areas of gold and diamond mining. So we have different classes of licenses. We have Class A, Class B, Class C mining license. Some of the mining license owners they have leasehold rights to the mining site or to the land, and then they can go and mine, and they can ship these products out of the country. They can have people who have importation license, where they can buy from those who have the mines, and then we also have alluvial miners who are people who, go on a small scale to do that. So you may have a company that is owning the mines, shipping out of the mines and exporting. You may have another company that is just involved with what? Going and just purchase the raw materials, the diamonds, the golds, the iron ores. You may have another company that's basically just doing the mines. They don't have the resources to ship out. They don't have the amount of money to come and buy. So they wait. Their business is for individuals and companies to come and buy from them. And then they are responsible. Whoever buys from them is responsible to ship those commodities out of the country and generate resources. Whatever way it is, at every stage of that particular progress, there is a revenue base. There's a revenue source that the government generates money from.
Let's talk a little bit about if a person or company outside of Liberia wants to contract with or engage a consultant who is based in Liberia, like an independent professional. Let's talk through the process of that. First of all, how would that work? If you were helping a company, let's say a company based in the United States or in United Kingdom, they've identified an independent consultant, maybe someone like yourself, but not at a firm, an independent consultant in Liberia to serve as an advisor. Maybe let's say the person is helping them evaluate some mining investment opportunities. What would the kind of legal process be to go through to hire that individual as a consultant?
So thank you, Jerry. I'll just give you a broad-based scenario on how these things happen. So normally, for these kinds of services, you want to talk to an attorney or you want to talk to a CPA or professional accountant in these particular stuff. So normally what you do is because you have to have the kind of confidence that the person or institution or firm performing these services have the requisite credentials, have the requisite professional competence, and has the requisite license to do that. So for accounting, we normally encourage business owners or potential investors to speak with the Liberian Institute of Certified Public Accountants. That is the body that is responsible to license accountants, professional accountants, to perform accounting and advisory services in Liberia. So you want to check with the Liberian Institute of Certified Public Accountants. They have their website. That website gives a full listing of the firms and individuals that are licensed to practice accountancy in Liberia every year. So every year, that list is updated. That list is expected, for instance, to be updated by January of next year to report those who are eligible or licensed to practice public accounting for the year 2026. Right now, the list of 2025 is up. And that's for the accounting side. For the law side, the side related to the attorneys, they have what we refer to as the Liberian National Bar Association. The Liberian National Bar Association is the umbrella body for all lawyers in Liberia. This institution licenses attorneys, counselors to practice law in Liberia. So there's a difference in Liberia the way we do that. So all of them are lawyers, but there are categories of lawyers. We have attorney laws. These lawyers are able to practice in all courts in Liberia except the Supreme Court of Liberia. Then we have counselors at law. Counselors at law, they are allowed to practice in all courts in Liberia, including the Supreme Court of Liberia. So that's the distinction. The counselor goes to the Supreme Court, while the attorney goes to any other court but the Supreme Court, unless he or she passes the Supreme Court bar exam. So in Liberia, we take exams as lawyers in two categories. In the categories of attorneys at law, and then after you became an attorney at law, you have 5 years to practice, and then you take the counselor at law exams. When you pass that exam, that is a bar exam. When you pass that exam, then you are admitted to the bar as a counselor at law, meaning you are the highest level of lawyers in the country. That's it for lawyers. So if you want to hire an advisor, and that advisor has to be an accountant or a lawyer, you need to follow these processes. And the list is published to the extent that it's independently verified by anybody anywhere around the world. You don't even need to be asking a lot of questions. You can ask questions directly to the institutions that publish the list. So there's a whole website that shows that.
Let's say that we are not trying to hire a accountant or an attorney. Let's say we're trying to hire a independent professional. Maybe they're a mining industry professional. They used to work perhaps at a global mining company, and now they are on their own, an independent professional. And we want to hire this person to give us, some advice about doing some due diligence on some mines in Liberia. What would the steps be to hire that person, not an accountant, not an attorney, but an independent professional in Liberia? Would that person, for example, can we hire them, and we don't want to hire them as an employee, right? We want to hire them as a consultant. Right. Would that person have to set up an entity, a business entity would they have to register a company for us to be able to engage them?
Well, so it depends. Consultants in Liberia operate out of two ways. They either operate as an individual or they operate as a firm or an institution. So my advice normally to business people is to interact with firms. When you interact with the firm, it comes with more responsibility. It's not just an individual passing around. It is a whole institution, just in case there become an issue of limited liabilities, an issue of liability associated with professional liability. Yeah. And the firm takes responsibility. So I've always encouraged people, always deal with firms. The firms have individuals, but the firm covers the individuals in any given sense. Most times the firms will be insured. If there's issue of professional liabilities, you find it more difficult running after individuals than running after firms. So I always encourage people to do the firm. So whether it is a professional outside, a lawyer, or an accountant, you still need to do what we call due diligence and reference check. I would strongly encourage business people or people wanting to invest into Liberia using a law firm or an accounting firm to perform that due diligence, especially a law firm to do that due diligence. And the way we know law firms who are licensed, there's a whole list published for them, and they carry license, right? They carry license to be able to practice. I do have a license for practice of law in Liberia as well, and that
All
license
right.
can be verified as well.
So let's say that the individual, this former, mining engineer who now has set up her own uh, her own entity, her own business entity in Liberia. Let's say that we get a contract in place with this individual. Well, with the person's firm, could be a one-person firm. Um, Talk to me about taxes. So, if let's say a U.S. company is going to pay the individual, let's say, you know, um, let's say that they agreed on a rate of call it $1,000, $1,000 fee. Would the company that's based in the US pay that $1,000 fee directly to the individual, or do they have to do any kind of withholding to pay the government any taxes? Or is it that that individual is responsible for paying their own taxes? Talk to me
That's a
about how taxes would work when you're paying an individual in Liberia.
that's a very beautiful question, and that question surrounds all of the rudiments regarding taxes in Liberia, just the basic fundamentals. So the first thing we have to establish is the U.S. company is not resident in Liberia, correct?
Let's let well, let's say that they're not, but
Okay,
what would
let me explain resident, non-resident, and all of that. Let me just
yeah,
use the opportunity
talk us through that.
to talk you through that. So if the U.S. company is not resident in Liberia, and that U.S. company is paying for services done on its behalf by a consultant that is resident in Liberia,
Yeah.
the taxpayer is the U.S. company, not resident in Liberia. But the
Okay.
person that taxpayer is paying that money for is resident in Liberia. That tax will be treated as a tax of withholding on the resident company because the company for which the service is being performed is from Liberia, and it is as a result of operations of revenue generated in Liberia. So normally for resident taxpayer in Liberia and for ordinary company other than mining company, for resident taxpayer, the withholding taxes is 10%. For non-residents, the withholding taxes is 15%. However, if that operations for which the service is being paid for has got to do with mining operation, whether resident or non-resident, the withholding taxes is 6%.
Okay, so it's let's say the company, let's just call it Company X, based in the United States, is hiring a mining engineer, call her Jane Smith, who is based in Liberia. And they're not operating a mine, but they're just hiring Jane Smith to, you know, do some market study, market assessment, do some research, right? They're doing
Right,
some research in Liberia for Company X that's based in the United States. And
right.
Company X, they agreed on the fee is $1,000. So would Company X pay Jane Smith that $1,000, and then Jane Smith has to pay the government taxes,
So,
or would the
so,
government?
so, so normally what happens, the law says the withholding agent is the person who the service is being performed for.
Oh, okay.
So it means that company X in the United States of America will have to withhold the 10% from Gene Smith, who is a resident taxpayer in Liberia,
Okay.
and pay him the difference.
Okay. So Company X would pay Jane Smith $900 and would have to remit
Yes.
$100 to the government of Liberia.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
And
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 then
then
if James Smith was a non-resident, it will be 15%.
oh,
So,
15%.
so you just need to understand resident and what constitutes a resident or non-resident. I need to explain that. To be a resident, you must have been in the Republic of Liberia for more than 188 days.
Mm.
If you exceeded 188 days, then you are a resident. But if you came in Liberia at any point in time and did not go beyond 188 days, you are non you are not a resident company. So for instance, if James Smith came to Liberia and spent 40 days and traveled back to another country and then came back and spent another 10 days and traveled back, once he has not spent accumulative at one point in time 188 days in Liberia, then he is considered a non-resident. So one need to understand what it is when we're speaking about a company that is resident or non-resident.
Okay. So you would have to worry then about withholding tax and remitting that to the government of Liberia.
Correct.
Um, Talk to us about any important labor law considerations that the foreign company should be aware of.
So most foreign companies, that's a very beautiful one. Most foreign companies has got to be concerned about issues related to contracts, documentations, and as far as it concerns, the need for so most of the time we look at issues related, to employees of companies, contractors, looking at occupational health and safety compliances for labor issues, fair treatment and safe work conditions, long-term or hybrid contracts may trigger employer obligations. And the specific labor law that looks about that will be the Liberian Code of Law, Title 18A. That is the reference of the labor law that really concerns itself issues related to labor matters. So you may collect an employee on a contractor basis, or you collect an employee and make him a full-time employee. But then there's a difference. If you took the guy and hire him for 6 months, it's contractor. Hire him for 1 year, it's also contractor. But if you keep him working, say for instance, you had a 1 year contract with him. The next year, you still got him on a contract. The following year, he stays on a contract. It is presumed that he is employed because that contractor period, that contract keeps rolling over and over and over again. It doesn't now resemble just an ordinary short-term contract. It appears to take a nomenclature of a long contract. In that case, that employee is entitled to run his taxes, his income tax, using the tax table in the revenue code because we have a law of tax collection. We call it the revenue code of Liberia. His tax application has to be done with the revenue code. But if he's just an ordinary contractor employee for a short-term employment, he is required to have 10% taken off his almost he'll be treated like a withholding tax agent resident in Liberia. That's in 10%. But if he's a full-time employee, then we'll use the income tax table, which is we can take some time and talk about that, but it's a little long in terms there's a set computation
Yeah.
where it assumes that if you make below 70,000 Liberian dollars annually, you have no tax. And then it's almost like our tax table is graduated progressive.
What tests does the government use to differentiate and determine if a individual should be classified as an employee or as a independent contractor?
So the government does not determine who is an individual employee or a contractor. It is the nature of the assignment of the person that dictates your status as either an employee full-time or a short-term contractor. Like I said to you, if I hire you in my company as a staff and I started with you as a contractor and give you a 1 year definite contract, you are treated as a contractor employee. That case, you will be paying 10% of whatever your gross salary will be on a monthly basis. But if I kept you 1 year, 2 years, and kept keeping you rolling, then it means I have to transfer, move from that 1 year thing, move from that 10%, into the tax bracket of the Liberian Revenue Code of Liberia. It's somewhere in section 201 or 201A of the Revenue Code. It shows the manner and form in which income tax withheld for employees are calculated. And another thing to that, those who are in the category of an employee, a contractor employee, they are also entitled or required, to make payment of Social Security taxes as well through an agency called the National Social Security and Welfare Corporation of Liberia.
You mentioned insurance briefly before. Tell us a little bit about if you're hiring a firm or engaging a firm in Liberia, and maybe
Right.
it's a single person firm, but they have set up an entity. What sort of business insurance should you expect that firm to have?
So they should have an insurance covering professional liability. You and I know in the professional world, sometimes, whether advertently or inadvertently, there can be some transgression at some point. There may be likely a transgression at some point in time. Who pays for the effect of that transgression? It is normally required that firms, should have insurance. They should have insurance covering just in case a company took a firm's money to perform a particular piece of service, and that service is not performed in time, and the funds are being consumed. Who remits? Who pays for the injury that the the payer suffers as a result of paying for a service for which he didn't get it? He didn't get paying resources for service for which he didn't get the service. So I would normally advise firms and individuals, wanting to contract with Liberian business firms to ensure that to ensure that they see that these firms have insurance coverage, especially for professional liability insurance. Of course, they will have insurance for their employees and all of that, but it's just important to do that, just to see that business entities are settled. But not all of them will do it, but I would normally advise people, to take that step forward. But in any case, like I said, whether you're contracting them because you look at them on an Allied Global Alliance website, or you look at them on the website of the Liberian Institute of CPAs or the Liberian National Bar Association, it is important to always do a background check, do a due diligence check to be sure.
Tell me about, as a very practical matter, how a, let's say, US based or UK based company could send the funds to pay that consultant. How would you actually send the funds? Would you do an international wire transfer, or would you use a service like Wise that is sort of a non-bank transfer service, or how would you actually pay your consultant?
I would strongly advise payment of consultants be done straight through bank to bank wire transfers, or even if it is a transfer that is not necessarily a bank to bank, but it should be tracked through some financial institution. It is very important.
All right.
So for instance, you can pay, like for instance, like you have your prepaid or your Visa card, credit card in the US, and we have the invoice structure from the firm in Liberia, and we give you an invoice where you click on it and you put your card number and make that transfer payment. It is still going through a financial institution because the bank of the consulting firm in Liberia will receive that money through their card or
All
through their
right.
account. So I will always advise that whichever methods for payment, you must ensure that it passes through our banking institutions formalities, just for the purpose of ensuring that everything is clear with money laundering issues.
Fantastic. Samora, for individuals that want to find out or perhaps contact one of your firms, you want to give us the websites of your accounting and your law firm, and we can include those links in the show notes. Tell us the websites of your firms.
Oh, sure, we can definitely. So the website of our firm especially for the accounting side, it is www.alliance certified public accountants, Alliance CPA, INC, www.alliancecpa.com. www.alliancecpa.com. So let me just repeat that.
All right.
www.alliancecpa.com.
Okay. We will put that
And
in the show notes. And what's the other one?
the other one is the law firm Touch Professional Consultancy Incorporated. Is TOP www.topcinc.com.
Okay. And we will include that link in the show notes as well. Samora,
Right.
thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much, Will. It's been my pleasure on this Zoom with you, and thank you very much for having us give the opportunity to tell the listening audience about Liberia, about our economy, and about business opportunities, and about professionals that can help them in the process they need in looking for consultants in Liberia.